August 26th to order. Will clerk call the roll, please?
Councilmember Berman?
Here.
Councilmember Burt?
Here.
Councilmember DuBois?
Here.
Councilmember Philsett?
Here.
Mayor Holman?
Here.
Councilmember Niss? Councilmember Scharf? Vice Mayor Schmidt?
Here.
Councilmember Wolbach? 6 present.
Okay, great. Thank you. And so we'll have 10-minute interviews of each of the candidates, and the first candidate is Jim Bear.
I know. What? Being a customer. Oh. No, there's a guy that works for.
Too far away.
On table. So welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
I don't know if you've ever been through this process or not, but maybe you've observed it. So we have 10 minutes for each of the applicants, and if you want to make a minute or so introductory comments, then that's fine. Then leave time for questions, and you'll have time if you'd like for a closing comment. And Greg will be the timekeeper.
And this, you can be heard this way?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, this is,
Live.
We're good.
thank you, Mayor Holman and council members. I'm very honored for the first time to be interviewed for any board or commission in the city of Palo Alto. I've handed out a one-page flyer that summarizes both my professional experience and nonprofit environmental efforts. Professionally, I'm probably known as the most active land use consultant for city approvals and for real estate development. I sold my real estate company, Premier Properties, in 2011 after suffering a disabling bicycle accident. What may not be known about me is how early in my career I developed an interest in energy efficiency and sustainability for projects, and the extent of my work with Sustainability Matters with 2 nonprofit organizations that I founded and funded. Wave One, focusing on sustainability in the downtown, and with Craig Lewis, Downtown Palo Alto Net Zero Energy. So I'm going to just talk about my professional experience and use of energy sustainability issues there. 3 recent projects have applications for all electric buildings that is not compulsory and extensive photovoltaic capacity, electric vehicle charging, and many progressive transportation programs. In 2008, in a building that I owned and managed, we developed Anna Esch's office as the most energy efficient of any congressional district office, in conjunction with the U.S. Green Building Council. But it was funded, it was initiated and funded by me and Premier Properties. I have very deep connections with commercial building owners as a sustainability advocate. I understand efficiency opportunities, costs, and challenges of split cost benefits between landlord and tenant, rate of return, and many, many relationships with general contractors that can get a best understanding of hypothetical and actual pricing. Provided no-cost headquarters for 15,000 square feet for Earth Day 1990 and for the initial year of operation of Bay Area Action. I can help design and advocate and feel that this is appropriate compulsory energy efficient performance standards with an understanding of costs and payback for commercial owners. I want to reiterate, I think it's time that we have some compulsory measures. The California Building Code made very great strides in increasing the energy efficiency under Title 24. And I think it's appropriate for us to do those things, and that takes a great deal of outreach and knowledge of owners to help design those kinds of programs. In the nonprofit world, I founded Wave One about 8 years ago and funded it with full-time and part-time employees until my disabling injury, and reinstituted it for 1 year. But it's kind of lying fallow now, but has been replaced by co-founding with Craig Lewis, Downtown Palo Alto's Net Zero Energy program. And as you may know, Craig is one of the country's leading experts in renewable energy. And so we look at doing very deep energy efficiency, fuel switching, and looking at renewable energy and in the downtown Palo Alto. And that's because that's where my greatest reach and expertise is.
And you might want to wrap up so you leave time for questions.
And I'm ready to wrap up and be asked questions about both my personal experience and the professional experience in my nonprofit work. Thank you very much.
Great, super, thank you. Questions? Councilor Burt?
Start off. Your interest in sustainability and renewable energy and energy efficiency is real strong from your record. Can you talk about kind of the other dimensions of the Utilities Commission around rates and operations and those kinds of oversight things, kind of the other nuts and bolts of the...
So I understand some of the issues that the Advisory Commission is working with are looking at renewable energy, looking at secondary grid, secondary transmission. I'm aware of non-transmission alternatives which require microgrids and emphasize localized renewable energy, such as at Cubberley High School, where the Office of Agency Services is located. Even with its enormous photovoltaic capacity, in a transmission failure, it doesn't provide for the transmitting, even for the service of emergency services. Now, in Palo Alto's police and emergency here, they might well have generators, but we have the opportunity for much more with microgrid management that is an alternative to just increasing secondary transmission lines. I am not expert in how to do recyclable water. I've read and understand that as an issue, and I'm supportive of how we do that. I'm going to again reiterate, I'm supportive of building owners, commercial building owners, taking their share of the cost. And I use an example of Americans with Disability Act. For the first 3 years of requiring handicap access to buildings and bathrooms, boy, it was a fuss. I mean, it was just constantly, how can the government be intruding on us so much? And that was for about 3 years. And of course, what happened is that not just in Palo Alto, but nationally, it was integrated into the cycle of what does it cost to do a building. I'm sorry I don't have in front of me the other issues.
Okay.
And I do want to say that since selling my company, I am in much more of a retired position with the capacity to really dedicate myself and be a learner. And I like to think, having done so many projects, approvals in Palo Alto, that I've learned to build consensus and play well with others.
Okay. Council members? Tom?
Have you been following the fiber program at all? And what's your expertise in terms of broadband?
I don't have expertise in bringing fiber to the premises, and I understand that again is one of the issues. My expertise really is in energy efficiency, and I shouldn't pretend that it is in photovoltaic and grids because my association with Craig Lewis. But I am a solid learner, but I cannot pretend to have expertise in other than the costs and paybacks with enormous sophistication for improving commercial buildings.
Okay.
But that does mean I do not have that expertise in some of the other areas that the Utility Advisory Commission will be looking at.
Let me ask one other one. What does downtown Palo Alto Net Zero Energy do?
Well, we've started working on the outreach of this kind of a program. The goal, what we learned from Wave 1 is we reduced our electricity use by 20%. Well, that's kind of a big ho-hum. We now are using this many kilowatts per square foot per year rather than X kilowatts per square year. It's very unique. Those kinds of accomplishments are very aimed at the industry who have an understanding of the engineering accomplishment. Downtown Palo Alto Net Zero Energy is to try to take 100 buildings and get them to net zero energy. That's headline news anywhere. Now that's only possible because the buildings are so small they can't support themselves with renewable energy. But with the downtown parking garages, if those were allocated to assessment district building owners, for those who perform at sufficient reduction of their energy use, if you reduce your use to X kilowatts per square foot, we will allocate to you some of the renewable energy being generated by the garages. Because that becomes a downtown district-wide issue. But the goal is to say, let's not do these improvements that are unknown and can't be known to the general citizenry. Let's really go do something that is role model and captures the attention of all the city and other cities.
Thanks.
Okay, good. We've got just over a minute for a really fast question or a wrap-up comment. Your choice. Is there a quick question?
That's right.
Okay, want to make a wrap-up comment?
I have the time to be an expert contributor, and that is not frivolous. And I'm sorry that I won't stay to see the results of tonight. I have an adult daughter who's only in town tonight. But I really appreciate the time you spent, and I hope that I'm viewed as a favorable candidate. And I assure you I will give this more time than can be imagined from someone who isn't beyond the end of their career. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
And just so you know, we don't decide
Yeah.
tonight. We actually.
Decision's not tonight, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So, Marianne Lee.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
joining us and for your application.
Thank
And,
you.
The drill is we have 10 minutes, as you could tell from the agenda, and if you want to take about a minute and do some intro comments, you're welcome to, and then we'll have council members ask questions, and you'll have, if you'd like, at the end, a minute to wrap up, if you care.
Well, I'll just start by thank you all for taking the time to speak with me today and review my application. I'm really excited to be here to be speaking with you about a role on the Utilities Advisory Commission. And just in terms of a couple of background comments, you have a lot of it ahead of you, in front of you. But I do believe that I'd be an excellent commissioner if I was so fortunate to be selected. And just a couple of summary points that again are in the comments. But I have a broad range of technology and business background that I do think combines in an interesting way for this role. So at a technical level, I do have very deep expertise. I was a PhD in electrical engineering at Stanford University. It so happens that my first job was actually designing communications networks, and I think this is an unusual role that spans both the energy side and the water side, but also the communication side. I also have, I think for the last, 15 years, been working in the energy, really in the clean energy industry, and have evaluated a lot of different novel technologies and their application relevant to energy generation, energy efficiency, energy storage, and water treatment as well. So that array of things, both from the technology side as well as the business side. Switching to the business side, I was a McKinsey consultant, so again, the generalist perspective around strategic planning, organizational and execution considerations. And then as I talked about on the clean energy side, a lot of that work I did was as an investor, and so it was evaluation of both key technology risks and then the business, the ability for those businesses and technologies to be successful commercially. So again, that commercial kind of technology nexus. And so, those two things together, I think really one of the things that I have well-developed skills in through that experience is identifying critical risks and then evaluating how to identifying that critical risk, evaluating it, and then how to mitigate those risks, which I think is a big part of bringing technologies into market. And I want to be brief, so I'm sorry that was so long. I also have a demonstrated track record of nonprofit work. I am an advisory member of my alma mater, so I'm a Stanford PhD, but my undergrad is UBC, and I work closely with the dean in terms of new programs. There are many of them around alternative technologies for sustainability and for energy technologies. Clean Tech Open is a local, now national, now global organization dedicated to bringing new innovative technologies into the energy industry, and I've been a founding advisory member of that group, and I'll stop on that. And the last thing I would say is that one of the things that's really important to me at this point is to become more active in my local community. The things that I've been talking about are sort of more macro, and I'd like to be more involved in the local community. And I'd like to do that in issues that are really important to me. And these issues around communications, around energy, around water, I think these are the most critical infrastructure elements that really kind of pertain to our daily life. And that's really where I'd like to focus my attention. I'm really prepared to commit to this and make all the time available that is required.
Great. It's
So
probably a good place to stop there.
leave my
So,
comments
okay.
there.
All right,
Any
great.
questions?
Greg Schmidt.
You talk about sensitivity to risk.
Yeah.
What would you bring to the UAC about the long-term impact of the drought on water and energy?
So it's a great question. It's a fairly general question. So I think I know that the UAC has been tracking this issue, or the staff has been tracking this issue very closely in terms of what the water levels are, and then there's an efficiency program in place with targets a reduction to that. I think, and I'm sure many other things, but that's what I know about. I think that one of the things to think through is how to set those targets against horizons in terms of thresholds that we have in terms of risk thresholds, and then how to manage, once those targets are set, tracking those in a way that identifies very cleanly when we're on and off course. So I think the target, I won't actually mention the target, I'm not sure what it is, but it's not going to be, I'm not confident enough in what it is. I think I think it's expected that would be pretty nonlinear, what that reduction would be. If you look at summer versus winter, the seasonality is pretty significant and different. And so I think getting through the seasonality of what that would look like from an outline perspective and then triggering at different levels. So trying to bring in sort of whatever we can bring in systemically and applying that up front in terms of identifying when we might be off course, as an example.
Okay. Any questions? Eric?
Are you actually, do you actually have an engagement with clean energy companies right now? Kind of boards or anything like that?
I do, so it's a great question. I was focused on energy investing before. I've actually shifted much more to big data and IoT applications.
Okay.
So that's my active area. I don't have any active investments in strictly in energy companies.
Mm-hmm.
But I am an employee of GE, which I do want to make clear, and GE obviously is at some level in these markets. I think it generally plays at a much larger scale, and I did go through some of the emerging technologies programs and the things that were being evaluated, and I didn't see anything that would be of conflict with GE, but I do work at GE.
Others, Tom?
So you mentioned you were interested in fiber to the premise. What interests you about it?
Part of it is just, honestly, that's where my roots were. I worked on one of the very first very high-speed communication networks that was developed for these markets. I do think that communications infrastructure is really one of the most critical services that can be provided. You look at perhaps education deltas that can come from that, learning deltas that can come from access to content that is ultimately provided by bandwidth. I just think it's a really important service. I think that cities have, and if you can get a high bandwidth backbone in place, then you can increase the volume quality of those services. I think cities have the ability to provide those kind of capabilities at a much advantaged price that can improve cost, I should say, that would improve universality and access. And so that's I think it's really key enabling infrastructure, and I think there's an opportunity for cities to participate in a way that's differentiated in offering that service.
Pat?
I don't know if you've had a chance to follow some of the discussions we've been having about potential fuel switching or electrification onto a clean electricity supply. Do you have any thoughts on the potential to do that, whether it's realistic, whether it could be done cost effectively over coming decades? Do you have any notions on that and thoughts?
I have some thoughts. I know that staff has been working on this a lot, so I can provide some initial thoughts. So I do think the fuel switching is an interesting point. And a lot of these things come to objective. So what's your objective? I think a lot of what's driving the fuel switching, if I understand it right, is the idea of being reducing emissions. And I think that's one objective. And I think you do have to balance it against, what's the set of objectives. So that's the first thing. And Palo Alto's fuel mix is atypical, so maybe that's not relevant. So I'll leave that off the table. I think in general, moving to higher efficiency, which is part of what's going on behind electrification, is always a good thing. I think that the issue is what you're implying is the upfront cost. So overall, the economics are generally positive if you have the right underlying technologies, but there's an upfront cost that has to be offset. I'm not a huge advocate of technologies that are fundamentally that don't have a payback, right? That are fundamentally economically ineffective. I would just say they're not ready for prime time. So I think the problem to be solved is how you overcome that upfront capital cost. To the extent it can be pushed back on the vendor, I think that's fantastic, and a lot of vendors are starting to offer those kinds of as-a-service models because the economics are available. I think there's always the opportunity to put in place financing packages that effectively offer that service as well independently, and I don't know if there's restrictions around the city being able to do that, but that's another way to do it. But fundamentally, don't like things that aren't economic and then just trying to structure the payments so that we can get it economic.
So Mark has a question for you, and then we are out of time.
Are you sure? I don't mind leaving it off the table if we're out of time.
You don't mind what?
I don't mind not asking it if we're out of time.
Okay.
I can try and be briefer. I'm sorry my answers were long.
We're down to,
It's not a
we're
simple
down-
question, so I'll leave it off.
We're down to 20 seconds, so
Yeah.
to be fair to everybody. So do you have just a couple of comments you want to make to wrap up?
Yeah, the last thing I would say is that I am a Palo Alto resident, have been so for, I don't know, I came to Stanford in '92, so whatever that works out to be, a long time. I have 2 children who are in Palo Alto schools here, and really just want to bring what expertise I have towards serving this community.
Thank you very much for your application and for your responses.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it
very much for your time.
Thank you.
And I don't know if you want to email me separately. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good afternoon.
Still working, huh?
So Lou, as you can see by the agenda, we have 10 minutes, so you'll have a minute to make some intro comments, and then we'll have questions by council members.
Okay.
Okay?
My name is Louis Borrego, but I prefer to be called Lou. I've been living in this city almost all my life. My parents moved here in '52. Went to Jordan, Alto High, and then on to San Jose State. And then some graduate work at Santa Clara. In the meantime, I've been working in a variety of different positions within the aerospace business here in the Valley. Today, I'm working with Lockheed Martin. And I started out in the financial end of it, and then into the auditing. And now I'm a contracts negotiator staff at Lockheed Martin. I've been interested in getting involved with the city. I haven't done too much of that. I did a lot of a support effort with the Ventura Association back in the early 60s and 70s and 80s. Then I acquired a job where I had to travel a lot, so I backed away from that and decided to try it again. So that's why I applied to the Utilities Commission Board, and I'm interested in finding out what's going on. I've had, over the period of time that I've lived in this city, there's been a lot of misunderstanding of what the city does, a lot of complaints about utilities and the way the things have been handled. And I have never been sure, or never have, investigated whether or not the utilities is what they're doing and how they're doing it. And I think that a lot of important things can be taken care of by more of a relationship with the public, which it's hard. I know it's hard for a lot of people to talk about it, but I think the city should be more involved with the public as to what they're doing. I have not seen a whole lot of explanation of the planning and what is to bring in the future, or bringing people together to discuss what the plans look like. That has been the biggest complaint of most of the people in the city. And that was one of the reasons I decided maybe I could help in that area.
Okay,
And
great.
since
So-
I've been living here most of my life, I thought,
Okay.
well, I know it well.
Okay, so leaving time for questions by council members. Mark, do you have a question?
I didn't have one prepared, but I can throw one out there. So Lou, as you know, we're facing a pretty difficult drought situation, and something that we're working on is a lot of conserving water and using water more efficiently. Do you have any thoughts on what the city and utilities could do more to kind of help residents
Right.
with that situation?
Be honest with you, right now, I don't have it. I added onto my house, and I was going to landscape, and just before they told us to start to cut back, I quit. I stopped that plan. So now I'd have a lot of dirt around the house. It looks okay, but I mean, you'd like to have some greenery sometime. But yeah, I understand the problem very well.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The council members, Greg?
You talk about transparency to the household. What would you like to see in a bill? Comes once a month, tells you what the utilities are up to. What would you like to
It's
see?
an interesting question, because I myself have come to utilities complaining about being charged, thinking I was overcharged. I mean, we always, as a residence home with 3 or 4 bedrooms, and sometimes the bill would come and it looked like I owned an apartment house, and I was getting charged for the whole apartment. Things that, and it's a misunderstanding of what you were trying to do. I think a breakdown, and more of it on the bill itself, of what that bill, I mean, the answer I would get was, oh, it's an average over time. Well, yeah, but how did you get to that average? And a lot of times, that wasn't visible in the bill. And I think that's an important part.
Okay. I'll ask the question. No, Pat.
Go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
Just following up on some of what you were alluding to about community concerns, and then you talked about planning, and by that, were you referring to development issues, or?
Both development, and I think, and also the how you plan to cut back on some of the water and so forth. It's not known. I mean, we hear stories such as, if you cut back too much, then you're going to charge us more because there's not enough demand on water. I'm not sure that's the case. I mean, those
So,
kinds of things should.
What do you think is the case?
I'm not clear. It's not clear to me, because that's, it's not there to look at or analyze or.
Have you read any of the staff reports on those subjects?
No, I haven't.
Okay, great, thanks.
When you came and complained this, or questioned the city on your bill, how good a job did the city do? I mean, were they wrong? Were you wrong? Was it communication? I mean,
The communication was good, but you couldn't push it much further because they either did not understand the problem well enough to explain it to me, and sort of shunned me off as to, it's just the way it is. It's the average over a period of time. And me, being a novice at it, I didn't ask enough questions like, what does that mean? What are you talking about, average over time? Show it to me. And a lot of people get frightened by the fact that you had to ask those kind of questions. That's really what I'm getting at.
Do you have any thoughts on fiber, how we ought to approach?
That's a good question. At one time, some years back, there was a lot of talk about fiber, and sort of squelched because I guess either the money was involved or the people that wanted to do it wasn't giving us a good enough deal. I think it has to be a comprehensive plan. I know that a lot of the wire's been underground. I'm not sure that that's a feasible idea, but it's something that should be looked at. But I think it'd be important to the city to do that, if the budget allows it, or how to get there. As a matter of fact, I was driving here and I was looking at all the wires strung up on poles along the way, and I'm thinking, it should be nice to clean this place up a little bit. The reason I say that is also, just today, had the utilities out. I live on Ventura Court, which is my backyard backs up to a parking lot for Ventura Grammar School now, or it's a nursery or child's care center. And they were actually, I thought, doing a good job. They were cleaning up a lot of the wiring on these poles. The one across the street from me, that was a real kludge. And I looked at it this afternoon, and it looks nice and clean. It looked like somebody just went out and pulled wires here, but they did a good job. But those kind of things, I think, are important.
I think we have just 1 minute exactly if you'd like to make a wrap-up comment.
Well, just that I'm very interested in trying to be of assistance to the city and to the people here, and would really appreciate being part of the Utility Commission. That's about all I have.
Very good. Thank you for your application and your
You're
time.
welcome.
Thank you.
Take care.
Appreciate it.
Good luck.
Karen, does everybody know
What's that?
do all the applicants know there's 12 people applying for one position?
I think it's a public
should.
agenda,
Yeah,
so,
okay.
yes. Yeah, they should.
Maybe if it floats.
Good evening. And I would so appreciate it if you'd introduce yourself.
My name is Ramji Digumarati.
Thank you.
I've been in Palo Alto since 1981. Been here for a long time, and I got 2 kids right now, and one at Gunn and one at Fairmeadow.
And before you go further, just to be clear, you have 10 minutes, and if you'd like to make intro comments, please do, but leave question time for council members, please.
Okay. Basically, I was interested in what the Utilities Commission does, because I worked in the energy production part of it and research part of it for a while, for 10 years, and then I did other things, but mostly I'm always interested in to see how the efficiency can improve of the power production wise and how it can be used efficiently. And because if we going towards the carbon neutral or carbon, what I would really like to go is carbon negative, because though we can be as a unit be a carbon neutral, but we also make sure what we do as an impact as a community with the rest of the state and the country will have, and how do you change there also to take the effect, making it, we helping to bring the carbon thing down. And so in that sense, I was very much interested in see what the utility does. And of course, as being a citizen in the community, always look at the cost of what the power happens, interest wise. So anything else you guys would like to ask me?
Absolutely. Eric?
Can you say something about your work experience in the power generation area?
I work in...
You were at Lockheed, but
I'm sorry?
Lockheed doesn't really do that, right?
No, even at Lockheed, I worked at different parts of Lockheed, and one thing I can say, Lockheed, I never worked more than 3 years in one project because the way the projects change all the time. But coming back to the power industry wise, I worked basically in development of what I call at that time is the cutting edge of power production cycle, where you take the exhaust gases and convert it into steam and re-inject it into the gas turbine, so that you not only increase the power that's generated from the same engine, but you also increase efficiency. At the same time, you basically bring down the emissions of the because NOx will go down considerably. And unfortunately, because of that, a slight amount of CO2 will go up on that part of it. But barring that, on the total, it's a system or cycle which we're trying to produce at that time. And I worked in that industry for full 10 years. And then I had another opportunity to do something else differently. And I went to that. In there, basically, I did the design and basically bring the plant to the operational wise. That's what I did. And then afterwards, I had an opportunity to work with wind energy, basically designing the wind turbines and the research in the turbines of how to make the wind turbines more efficient. And that's part I was able to do. And it's nothing to do with Lockheed, and because of my interest, and I had an opportunity to work in that field.
Can I ask for a startup, for a university, for a
It's a research
government?
It's
Sorry?
a small research function, research unit. And I knew people there, and they said, "You want to come and work with me
Cool.
with on the design of the wind turbines and how to increase efficiency." So I was able to work with them, which
Very good, thank you. Greg?
You mentioned in your write-up that you're interested in, quote, customer-friendly carbon footprint. What do you mean by customer-friendly?
Basically, what I'm talking about being a customer friendly is more in the terms of when, as I said, I've been in Palo Alto since '81, and I've seen the cost of the utilities go up. And I've always thought, how can you bring the cost of the utilities down? What can be done to bring it down? And when the cost goes up, you need to explain to the citywide why it has gone up and what caused it, and where is we don't produce, in the city, we don't produce energy at all. We get energy from hydro plants or other, and then we'll buy energy from other things to make it more efficient wise to provide for but yet you have to make sure that the members in the city understands that it's being done in a very efficient fashion. And in order to provide them, how do you help the customer to be a member of the utility so that they can do what they can do to increase the efficiency of their house to start with, the CFLs, which is one of the way of doing it. And other way is to, I did hear the last meeting is that they were talking about making electrification of the whole house, completely going away from gas towards electrification, which is a wonderful way to go. But you are still have to get the power from somewhere else. That means you have to make sure the power that you buy is still going to be carbon neutral or even carbon negative. And then you need to explain to the city folks saying that this is why we're going, this is what we want to do. And that's what, and again, as I get these letters in the mail, I don't think it's come from the utility function, but it comes from a third party telling me how good I am in water, power-wise, and everything else. And many times I'm trying to make sense of it, how they compare with it. And sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. When I call the utilities and ask them, hey, how did this number come across, and how are you comparing when one house and another one? Sometimes they say, no, we give all the information to the third party, and they're giving it to us. And for me, it's not helpful, because you have to explain to them, this is what we did. Even though we try to keep the power consumption, everything down, I don't seem to ever come across, hit the best one possibly, because depends upon the square footage area happens, and how that's taken into it, I never understand. And I don't understand the formulas they use.
Good.
Very good.
If a PhD can't understand it, that's not good, right?
Well, if it's formula, some explanation is there, it makes it a lot easier.
No.
And my point was, utilities to take one step forward and say, this is what we're looking at a house, and this is what we're looking part of it, and this is how we compare one house to another house. And that makes a lot of help.
Good. Other questions? We got time for one more question. Tom?
Have you been, looks like you did a little homework, watched the meeting or read
Yes,
some
I did.
notes.
And it was a very interesting meeting. I looked at 3 or 4 meetings, and this one particular meeting, when they're talking carbon efficiency of electrification of the house. It caught my interest because that's what I really like to look at. And I heard the whole thing, and basically, as I wrote in there, the Commissioner English, what he came out the comment was, I thought was very to the point, and at least I agreed with him completely. And my point was, that's the way you should go. And that's the reason I mean, it's wonderful to have a carbon neutral system. And then what we're doing is we're taking our responsibility and giving it to somebody else, saying that you make it there, and as we consider we're carbon neutral, I want to be proactive to make sure where we're getting the power from. Otherwise, we also could take it one step further to do that.
Great, thank you. So I think we have just time for you to make some closing comments if you'd like. Well, actually, I have one question for you,
Sure.
come to think of it. Can you describe your collaborative style?
I basically like to talk to people, figure out what's involved in it. Of course, I will have my own opinions. I mean, and as I read through it, I make my own opinions. But at the same time, if somebody can tell me a better opinion or better comment of what I'm trying to do or what I put out there, I'll listen to them and then have a conversation with them to figure out what it has to be done. And then I like to come with, sometimes I may agree, sometimes I disagree. Yet I've needed to understand where the other person is coming from, and what if I'm like given the chance to be on the commission, what other commissioners have concept-wise, and also what the utility members, the utility people who work for the utility, what their comments are. I need to understand that, and based on that, I'll make my decision on that part of it.
Great, really appreciate that. You have 1 minute for closing comments, please.
Well, as I said, I've been in Palo Alto since '81, and I've seen everything all the way, one part of it, other part of it. So, and I'm looking at, in the sense that if I'm given the chance to work on the commission, one of the things that I really like to see, that city improve the efficiency across the city, and also I like to become, as I keep saying, is to be proactive and make it not only carbon neutral, take it one step further to make sure that whatever energy that we're buying, it can be either from the solar or the wind or different kind of renewable energies wise. Again, we need to see, one thing you have to keep in mind is that when you go all electrical, you have to see the power swings and how do you cover that part of it, still being a carbon neutral. That's something very important to look at part of it. So I'm very happy to work on the commission if I'm given a chance.
Thank you so very much. Your timing's perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I like to be on time.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much for your application. So, Hillary Gans.
Yes, Hillary is Skyping in. Just give me just a moment. Get that set up.
What's for dinner?
Yes, I did. It's a little late. I went to the back kitchen because it was close.
Oh, did you say there was dinner back here?
What?
Did you say there was dinner back here?
It's for the PTC.
We've been here since 5.
That's why it's
They had a pretty nice dinner.
I don't get that.
I've never seen that before.
There might be some stuff left. There's a lot of food.
Yeah.
Maybe we're Skyping with Hillary. Okay, Hillary, give me just a sec to get you all plugged in. Can you hear me okay? Internet connection problems, that's wonderful.
Do you want to do Tim Gray and come back to Hillary?
No, we have him here.
You got
now
him?
we're gonna see how all this works.
There we go.
Ah, good.
Okay, so Hillary, they can definitely see you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Great.
So you have about 30 seconds to a minute for an introduction, and then time for council members to ask questions.
Okay, thank you. I have a written statement, so I'll just read off my page, if that's all right.
Yes, fine.
So thank you for allowing me to Skype in. I'm just traveling right now. So I thought I'd pose some questions to myself and answer those questions like an FAQ format just to keep this efficient. So who is Hillary Gans? I'm a 25-year resident. I have 3 boys that have been through the Palo Alto Unified School District. 2 are in engineering programs right now. I have a physician wife who's at Stanford. I'm a lover of Palo Alto's community and the can-do and do the right thing attitude that I think Palo Alto stands for. I have a passion for sustainability and have spent my personal life and my career in service to the environment. My personal style is straightforward, pragmatic, with a bent towards creative problem solving. What past experiences demonstrate that I can be a contributor to the utility advisory. I have a master's in environmental engineering. I currently work for Rethink Waste as a senior contracts manager. Rethink Waste is a joint powers authority on the peninsula that works like a utility to provide solid waste and recycling services to the 12 cities north of Palo Alto. So cities from Menlo Park to Burlingame, my agency and I manage those contracts and that solid waste service. I worked for that agency for the past 8 years and have built infrastructure to maximize recycling and to keep rates low for those cities. Projects that I've worked on while at Rethink Waste are on my application, but they include the largest PV installation on the peninsula, almost a megawatt of power. Researching large volume battery storage systems that included a Tesla battery. Building a $55 million state-of-the-art recycling facility that is LEED Gold certified. And setting up an education program that educates 6,000 students per year about recycling and solid waste and environmental conservation issues. In the Palo Alto community, I was a founding member of the Palo Alto Green Energy group. If you recall, that was the group that was advocating for anaerobic digester to make energy, and the project stands with council approval right now, and I believe that the waste treatment plant is working on the engineering. Next question, what are my interests and reasons for being on the Utility Advisory Commission? I want Palo Alto to be a model for the U.S., and I believe that the publicly managed utility is the best model. Specifically, what I would do and ways that I see changing the structure really is to expand on the collaboration, connections, and partnerships that are possible with the extremely talented businesses and institutions that surround Palo Alto. I feel like those partnerships could be strengthened, and there'd be a lot of benefit to the city for that. I recognize that there are a lot of talented, well-intended people that are on the current Utility Advisory Commission, and I also believe that the council listens to the commission's plans. Lastly, I'd like the opportunity to serve on the commission because I'm interested in expanding my own career and my own experiences in the area of public utility services. And I believe that my service would be a great way for me to learn and experience in that arena.
Okay,
So
great.
that's my prepared statement, and I'd be happy to.
Okay, great. Council members, questions?
There's a speaker on
Tom?
Hi, Hillary. Very impressive background. The Utilities Commission has also been looking at fiber to the premises. Do you have any thoughts about, city-run broadband service?
I'm not educated in the area, to be honest. My opinions are that Palo Alto should be a leader in technology. The city should be a leader in technology services. So I can't understand why we should. It's obviously complicated from a financial and business perspective, but my opinion is that we should be a leader in all areas.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, colleagues? Pat?
Hillary, this is Pat. Can you talk a little bit about I know that you have had both a very technically and environmentally strong program with recycling of solid waste, and you alluded to it being very cost effective as well. Can you give some thoughts about what you think are either conflicts between those objectives or ways that they can be achieved simultaneously, as they apply to our utilities in particular?
Yeah, a complex question, and I think the answer is also complex, but I cited specifically the think that partnerships with the local business community and Stanford and other universities would benefit the city, and there's a lot of capabilities in our neighborhood, and I don't know how well the current Utilities Commission uses the connections and capabilities of the community. I think that would be a way to get more leverage from the dollars that the city spends.
Okay, thanks.
Other colleagues? Greg?
You haven't mentioned much about water, wastewater. Where does that fit in your thinking?
So if someone could repeat the question, the mic was kind of murky.
It was about kind of water use and wastewater, and where does that fit into your thinking?
Well, speaking of wastewater, I mean, I think that the city is uniquely positioned because it has its own wastewater treatment plant. I realize that that's not a captive facility, and that there are other member agencies. It functions as sort of a joint powers authority, so that there are other member agencies that participate in the financial components of that facility. Decisions to reuse water and build infrastructure to use water from that facility would be largely made by Palo Alto with the support of the other cities, and the consumption of that water would largely be by Palo Alto. So I think it largely becomes a financial issue about how much the city's willing to pay for recycled water, because the implementation in a fairly captive facility, I think is very important. It becomes just a financial decision at that point.
So you've got about a minute to make any wrap-up comments. Do you want to conclude there?
I don't have anything more to say. I just wanted to thank you for your consideration.
I think Tom maybe has one more question.
I have a
for
quick
you.
one. Did you see the city roll out its new composting service, and how does that compare to what's going on in San Mateo County?
I was very happy to see that service be rolled out. It's about time. was my gut feeling. But I also understand that there are contracts in place. There's franchise commitments. There's costs. There's rates. These are complex issues, and you can't necessarily make a clean and obvious decision. So I realize that the will to add food scraps existed a long time ago, and it took a while to get that implemented. But I'm very happy to see it. I think it's a good decision, and I think it fits well into sort of the strategic plan of trying to bundle all the organics coming from the city and use that feedstock to make energy for the city's program for the green utilities.
Great. Thank you very much, Hillary. Thank you for your application.
Thank you.
Enjoy your time away.
Thank you.
Did he apply by Skype last time? Wasn't it the same guy, or was it somebody different?
Somebody else.
Or was it somebody else?
That was not as good as the guy at the Giants game.
That was the Art Commission, and
That was-
somebody from the ARB, I think, did.
Oh, was it ARB? You reminded me of him for some reason.
I was gonna ask him what he thought utility customers wanted, but I
Yeah.
didn't wanna go there.
In terms of what?
What do you think's important to utility customers? We should talk about it afterwards.
Why don't you want to go there?
We'll get our next candidate in the room.
Oh.
Questions.
Hello, Karen.
Welcome, welcome, Tim.
gentlemen.
Welcome, Tim. So I think you know the routine. You've got 10 minutes. If you want to take a minute and make some opening comments, and then leave time for councilmember questions, that would be ideal.
Sure. I'm Tim Gray. I live in South Palo Alto. I come to you as a happy utility customer, and I would like to see that our town continues to provide good customer service at, reasonable rates into the future, and that we have the chance to do the environmentally good things that we do into the future, because I don't know that we would be able to be quite as innovative if we had a bunch of investors out there pounding on us for profits. I've been a customer of the utility for 28 years. Just as some of you know me, but as an introduction, I'm a certified public accountant. I live in South Palo Alto. I drive a green vehicle. I'm an environmental enthusiast. I care greatly that we've reached carbon neutral, and that's an important goal for me. Not at the expense of endless dollars, but within a reasonable range. I think that's a wonderful mark that we've made in our national presence of running the utility. I was an early volunteer for Palo Alto Green, so I've been paying that premium for a long time. And it's too bad that that wasn't just a straight requirement for all candidates for city council and for city commissions to go back and look at the bills and see who's been enrolled and see who's really walking the walk. I was trained in total quality management and was taught that all stakeholders should be represented. And I'm a homeowner, customer service. It should be one of the number one values in selecting a representation on a commission. And I think that now with John, is it Melton, gone, his financial skills were lost, and I offer myself as a CPA, and not as an advocate of any audit process or financial scrutiny, but just as a diversity on the commission. I think we're probably overrepresented in utilities experience and underrepresented in financial skills. And financial skills would be just a tool that would be used in measuring the merits of every decision that came across, kind of like putting something on the scales of justice. And I do have just a couple more words that I'll finish up with, or I could go into that if you'd like to spare the questions.
Mark.
So, quick question, Tim, and thanks for applying. So you mentioned Palo Alto Green in your application, and we're kicking that off, following up on the successful Palo Alto Clean efforts. Do you have any thoughts or suggestions on what we could do to get more citizen adoption of that program? How we can get more folks to kind of sign up, or anything that you've seen that we could be doing better with that program?
Well, I think just if we could articulate that if I'm writing an extra check, that it's really making a difference and not just an added fee so that some bureaucrat somewhere gets another dollar to spend. Mm-hmm. That we're actually making a difference with those fees, and that by me writing that check, that carbon is remediated and forever put away.
Thanks.
Okay, great. Pat?
One of the things that is a role of both the Utilities Department and the commission has to do with communication, and I see you reference to a background in journalism. Can you share what that background is and how you would potentially translate that into your role on the UAC?
Sure. That's an untapped and tremendous resource that I think that if we can reach out and have a greater understanding of what we're trying to accomplish with these environmental measures. My work as a daily journalist in Idaho, I had a major in journalism, and now I sold out and became a CPA. However, I always wrote the proposals for the, they called it disproportionate share funding for the Lucille Packard Children's Hospital, and it was what were all the special things that we were doing that made us so special, and to tug at the heartstrings of the state and get funding. And I did that for St. Luke's Hospital up in the city, and I remember writing a proposal for them. It took 4 months, and when I read it, I cried. And I did it for free, except I put a 2% kicker for everything over their previous historical funding level of $2 million. And when the award came out, they got $9 million. And what that was they had never told the story in the context of St. Luke's Hospital, which was a hospital in one side in the poorer side of San Francisco. They'd always told their story in the context of a provider, which was one little dot within the context of Sutter hospitals in these big systems. But within their community, there was this tremendous story. And so I always look for the story and what's understandable and what's going to motivate people to take the right action. And sometimes numbers and concepts don't always blend, and I've been able to take numbers and turn them into concepts that can be shared broadly. And that seems to be something that my clients appreciate a lot. Yeah.
Very good. Greg?
One of the things the UIC keeps running into are these state laws, new state laws in both water and electricity that disallow pricing, which can be conservation oriented, which makes it very tricky to set prices and very tricky to tell a clear story. What's your thinking about the constraints on pricing?
Well, I don't think you're going to change that with any big legal action or anything. So you have to find some other currency besides dollars that's going to change people's behavior, and you're going to have to really do some soul searching around what kind of information, because what is going to cause someone to really care and bring something down. And I think short of public shame, I know that was done back in the 70s, but I can't imagine that we would go back to that. But I've in working with children's hospitals, I've always found that even the most mediocre person on a staff doing a real clerical function, if you could tap into their idealism, they could become a superstar. And if we could tap into the idealism and really, it's not just one more political story, but that people felt they were a part of it.
Yeah.
We might be able to do something.
Tim, you have about 1 minute. Do you want to wrap up?
Sure. One of the things that I have in my experience is a total quality management. All stakeholders are to be represented. I'm a homeowner, a customer. I have finance skills, and I really think that a CPA finance guy is needed. I like as I coach my clients, I tell them to put aside their personal preferences when they're selecting committee representation, because this lean, all this new organizational management, total quality management. You're wanting to bring together all the stakeholders and make sure everybody's represented. So I say, put aside your personal preferences and make selections that assures the diversity and the skills mix needed by the greater enterprise, and not your personal preferences. And I really think that finance is needed. Utilities experience, maybe we have enough of.
Great. Thank you very much for the application.
Thank you. I should have started with a thank you, but you'll forgive me.
Good evening. Thanks for applying.
Okay, thank you.
We have 10 minutes. It's good up front. You can give us a little purview of why you're here, but be sure to save time for questions.
Okay.
And then there's a minute at the end to wrap up.
Great. Okay, so my name is Bhushan Gupta, and I'm here because as a longtime resident of Palo Alto, I've had sort of an interest in the utilities, because when we first moved here, much to my surprise, we discovered that they are municipal utilities, and that was not a model I was used to. And it, at the time, translated into incredibly, reasonable rates for, the wide variety of services. And then, obviously, over time, over the last 17 or 18 years, the rates have changed. But I was always very interested in understanding, an organization where the customers and the owners are essentially aligned, and how that must benefit both the customers and the owners. And any organization, so, and the reason I'm interested in organizations like that is, a long time ago, I was involved in the student credit union movement, which is a financial institution where the owners of the institution and the customers are also one and the same. So I like that kind of structure. I think there are cases for which it proves very beneficial for all the stakeholders.
Great, thank you. Councilmember, questions? Pat?
Okay. Can you share a bit more about any background that you have in the different utilities that are part of our portfolio, and any thoughts about future directions we should take that are different from our courses today?
Right. Okay, so in terms of background in the different utilities, I mean, I would say that I don't have specific experience in either the electricity, gas, water. I guess there's also the wastewater, dark fiber. So I don't have any specific, let's say, background in those other than as a consumer. And I think that, probably the perspective I would bring is that, obviously with a technical background, bringing that technical background to bear on, what are the questions that we should be asking, what are the directions that we should be probing for, are there things that we could be doing, or are there places where we should not be, and in sort of preparation, I mean, I've looked at, sort of the minutes of the advisory commission over the last year, and I kind of, sense a certain set of themes. And it obviously, a lot of it has to do with, what are we doing for the greenhouse gas type of, or global warming? What can we do at a local level for the mitigation of those effects? And I think that's good and should be continued. There's also been some discussion about, obviously rates are a big part of what the advisory commission, at least, it doesn't really,
necessarily have a hand in it sort of advising the utilities on, these are the rates, and I guess we should, see what we can do to agree about making, basically getting before it goes to the council, making sure it passes the sniff test. And in terms of sort of future directions, I mean, one of the topics that's been, for me, very close to my heart is sort of fiber to the home. So when I first moved in 1997, I remember there was, I wouldn't say a big push, but there was definitely a lot of discussion, a lot of words about, can Palo Alto do this? And obviously it didn't happen. Later they did a smaller trial, which, probably didn't pan out the way that it was expected. So, that's one of those topics which I think, is something that, you can look at, and it has to make financial sense. So that's the first bar, and it's the biggest bar, hasn't been crossed yet. But I believe that, and my favorite quote is that, 30 years from now, people are going to ask, well, it was so obvious that we should have done something for super fast internet connectivity, because it's almost like a utility, or if not already a utility. But the question is, what's the business model? And I think that, unfortunately, still has to be addressed. But I think that that's a place where utilities such as Palo Alto's could, kind of maybe visit some more, or try to find another business model that might work as a common carrier or something.
So why should we do that ourselves as opposed to waiting for Google or Comcast to do it?
So I think that it goes back to the fact that Palo Alto is municipally owned. And what that means is that if Comcast is going to do it, their ROI has to be at a certain level before they'll actually invest the money to do it. And we're not sure, and whatever they then end up charging is also driven by the fact that they have to satisfy Wall Street in terms of, their, return on investment. If, as a municipal utility, we have, let's say, a way to do it that does not require the same rate of return, but still provides the same value to the customers, then that's probably going to be a lower bar to cross.
Do you think we could do it for less money?
I think we could do it for less money because, our shareholders and our customers are one and the same. So we can reap some of the benefit of that ecosystem. I don't know the model, unfortunately, today that would say, yes, this is how we would do it. But I firmly believe that it's one of those, things which is going to be a utility, and if it isn't already a utility in many places, or treated as a utility, I should say.
Tom?
So you're currently a CTO?
Yes.
And I guess are you concerned about the time commitment with the UAC at all?
No, I mean, I think that, I'm a pretty good reader, so a lot of them, I've gone through a lot of material.
You actually read all the documents?
I did. And there was, in engineering, there's a sort of concept called signal to noise, right? So what's actionable versus, a lot of the stuff. So in some of the documents, there's a lot of noise and there's some signal. So it's relative. It was something I could easily parse. And then the commitment of, basically one night a month is not an issue. Yeah, thanks.
So I had a question about undergrounding of utilities.
Yes.
And just by your response, you sound very informed on that already. So how would you go about undergrounding, finishing that project? Because it's not been done very much in town.
Yeah, and I think it's a challenge. I used to live in Palo Alto where there weren't undergrounded utilities, and then we moved to a place where there was. And I'm so glad I live in a place where there's undergrounded utilities, because while there are some, issues with undergrounding, cost primarily, and, like if there's a fault in the line, it's harder to find. Okay, so I understand that, but the benefit from a, kind of a storm comes along and you don't worry about tree limbs anymore, does do that. Now, the challenge is that I believe most of Palo Alto is not undergrounded, and to underground it, you have to figure out how to get the cost, apportioned. Now, in the house that we first lived in, the cost from the pole to the house, at that time, this was 97, from the pole to the house was undergrounded, and that cost was paid for by the developer. You could, so the question is, could you ask people to defray part of, or share a part of that cost, at least from, the closest pole to the house? So that would help a little bit. I think the other challenge is getting AT&T with the phone lines and other sort of pole, other companies that use the poles to also agree to do it at the same time, and to figure out that cost sharing is actually a pretty big challenge, because my understanding is that AT&T has balked at some of that undergrounding cost when their wires are running, on the poles, and they would naturally have to sign up to do it.
All right, very good. I believe we're out of town. 30 seconds we have.
Okay, so I guess in wrap up, the utility. So when this sort of opening came up, I thought to myself, well, this is something I've obviously been interested in. Maybe I can, take a stab at, applying and going through the process, because I think, I have an interesting perspective, and I would really like to learn more about the utilities, and I think this is one very effective way to both contribute and learn.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you for your application.
Thanks for applying.
You got a handout. Thank you. Oh, we don't have enough handouts. I'll scan it really quickly.
The same was
I think it's got more.
Welcome. Thank you for your application, and we have 10 minutes for the interview, and you're welcome to spend a minute or so and make any opening comments, and then we'll open it to councilmember questions.
Okay, thank you. First thing I want to do, which I shouldn't do, but I want to apologize, because when I printed out my application this morning, I noticed that the most important question on there, number 1, about background and relevant experience, I hadn't filled out, or didn't, and I said, did I fill that out or not? So what I did, we've passed out is just a summary to fill in the blank on the first question. What I wanted to mention, what I really think I can, and we can go into more detail, there's a number of things I think I can bring to the Utility Advisory Commission. First thing is, I've got over 20 years of environmental and utilities experience. So I've been there. I know what it takes to operate utilities, and sort of like riding a bicycle. I haven't done it for a while, but there's things that I won't forget. They're part of my intellectual DNA. Specifically, I think my skills are related to my analytical skills and my financial skills. So if we're talking about things like rate making or reserves or financing, capital, and budgeting, I've got a pretty good handle on that. And then I've had a couple of successful City of Palo Alto volunteer engagements, one being the Palo Alto Mediation Program, and the other being the Infrastructure Blue Ribbon Commission. And I think besides being an intimate participant in that, what I learned from both of those is listening and patience, which is really important and not something that was natural to me. So those are the things I wanted to point out, and I'd welcome any questions you'd have.
Okay, thank you very much. Pat?
Mark, you have an extensive background in management and senior management roles in both our utilities and Mountain View's, which I've seen over the years when people move from that function to either elected or point of office that is overseeing the staff role, as well as advising on policy. That it's both a real asset to have that knowledge and experience, and then can create not a conflict of interest, but I'd say a tension in perspectives, and whether there's a temptation to be a commissioner through the eyes of staff. What do you think about that issue, and what do you think about how you would function in that regard on the commission?
Well, I don't really see the problem at this point. It's been so long since I've been in that role, and I really had a whole nother career as a teacher at Woodside High School. And I understand that, I respect it, but I think one of the things I can do is I can communicate well, understanding what's coming off, and I wouldn't be one to get into the weeds. I mean, you could see, I think you said there's a temptation, you know, we did it this way, or why aren't you doing it that way? That's not the issue here. The issue is policy, and my feeling on this, if I can add anything to this legacy, because it's a tremendous legacy for this city that helps move it along, move it forward, and improve things, then that's what I've done. And other people will carry that out.
Thank you.
Tom?
I'm really interested in your comment about the water rates and the. Could you talk a little bit more
Sure.
about how you think that could have been handled?
Well, you know, I'm probably, out of the 20 or 25,000 people that got this little notice in June, I'm probably the only one who responded to it at all, or reacted to it. And here was my reaction. Didn't the council just pass a rate increase? And why are we getting a notice for another increase a week after the council's passed it? And I saw these things, and they just sort of, you know, got those old juices flowing. Because my feeling is these things have to be done well and clearly, and you don't want to go back for rate increases any more than you have to. And to go for one a year is probably too many, but to go back twice in a couple of weeks just seemed crazy to me. Well, I read some staff reports. I called some people on staff, and we had some nice discussions, and I understood what happened, and I thought it was a bit crazy. And when I talked to the rate analysts, we both agreed, yeah, this probably could have been handled differently, a little bit better.
So you would have done one very large increase?
Well, it would. The original increase should have been passed, and then, you know, we've got such a talented staff. You get into things like cost of service studies, and does this have to be exactly this, which is, you know, way beyond what's necessary. Would have had that and made the issue of the drought surcharge, you know, a totally separate issue. And this thing sort of blended it, and we agreed, you know, it could have been handled a little differently. But in my discussions, you know, as I learned more, I said, okay, I understand what happened, and we both agreed it could have been done a little better. And I think that's the type of thing, if we're on the commission, I sort of would, it would have blown a whistle in my head. Is this really the way we want to do it? And how is this going to, how will the public react to it? And I guess the answer to that is I'm the only one who reacted to it.
So you weren't actually, we got the emails.
Okay.
We're happy to pass those along, by the way. Do you think, go ahead, Mark.
You should,
Go ahead.
So Mark, you talked about, you know, one area that you're really interested in is water, its reliability, cost, quality, and short and long-term supplies, and that maybe there have been some missed opportunities over the past couple of decades. Are there any things in particular that you know, either you saw that we didn't do that we should have, or things that we should really focus on moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, we want to talk about a back to the future moment. In 1992, I was in a meeting with the two city managers of Mountain View and Palo Alto, Phil Boble, a name you probably know, and we had this great plan for water reclamation and use of reclaimed water out at Stanford Industrial Park and, you know, over at Shoreline and Moffett Field and all this sort of stuff. And I read in the paper, a month or two ago, it's finally happening, okay?
Not exactly, but.
Well, it's getting there. It's getting there. It took 23 years after we had this, pretty much the same plan, the same concept. And as I thought about it, I understood why. Once that drought was over, and you start to look at the economics, and there were water quality issues, and I think right now there's finally the critical mass to get it done, but it won't just happen. There will be, if we have 2 consecutive great winners, who knows what will happen to that project. But it's one that I really think has some long-term potential. We don't know what the technology will bring in terms of cost-effectively bringing that water up to a more potable quality. And between pumping it into our groundwater and possibly blending it into a potable supply, I think there's great potential there for reliability for the system, and I think it should be exploited to the maximum that it can be.
So my question is about the redundant power feed. You mentioned the Tesla plane.
Okay.
And the power outage and the redundant power feed. It does get discussed, but we haven't made not very much advancement on it. Why is that important to you, and what ideas do you have on how to maybe implement something?
Well, it's important that when you turn the switch on, that the power goes on, and I think that's what's important. And to see that vulnerability, I think shocked us all. In fact, what was interesting about that vulnerability, my son, who was working at a VMware server center in Wenatchee, Washington, knew about it before we did. That really affected him. And I'm just saying, there's got to be some things that can be done here. And I don't know exactly. I haven't really studied it thoroughly. It just struck me as this happened. What was it, 4 or 5 years ago? I don't remember exactly when. And why doesn't it move forward? And I don't know the answer for that, but it just seems to me. And I noticed it's one of the 5 issues that I think the council said we have to focus on. Then if it gets focused on, it's likely to progress, just like the reclaimed water. I found it interesting to just sort of divert to reclaimed water for a second. There was, in the application, it talked about sort of 7 charges of the Utilities Advisory Commission. And I assume they get updated regularly, but 4 out of the 7 had something about reclaimed water in it. So it sounded to me that must be something important. I think that electrical transmission line is important as well. On the other end of electricity, I've also had experience in my previous life here of working on underground utility districts and making them happen. And so that sort of interests me. Again, I can see why it hasn't progressed to the extent we thought it would. 30 plus years ago, we thought it would be done by now.
Yeah. So we're down to just a little bit less than a minute.
Sure.
So if you want to take another question as opposed to making any final comments, that's
I'd be glad to take another question.
Okay,
That's
Eric?
what you're interested in.
How should we think about fiber?
How should we think about fiber? That's one area.
That's a short question.
Yeah. How should we? Very carefully. I haven't dwelt into that one, but it seems to me if it's a utility service like other ones, and people took a risk 100 years ago going into electricity. I think just have to look at it, see what the benefits, what the costs are, see what its future is, and go slowly with it. But it's probably one area where I'm a little behind, but I certainly would catch up and find it pretty interesting. Sorry I can't give you any more than that on it, but that's my thoughts on fiber.
You managed just fine, so thank you very much for your application.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So I take it that electricity risk 100 years ago was on whether we should take it on, not whether it was a passing fad?
Yes. You'll never catch on.
Comcast supplies all our electricity.
Thank you.
Huh? We're good. No, well, he did address the staff folks. The apologies for staff. And that wasn't, the tone I got.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Hi, Natalie.
Thanks. Yeah, you
Welcome.
see, I don't give up, right?
That's good. That's
It's
good.
very good.
We get many good applicants for only a few openings.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
I
we do.
understand that.
We do.
And,
So if you recall, we have 10 minutes, and you'll get to make opening comments if you care to, and then leave plenty of time, if you would, for questions from council members.
Sure. So just a reminder, reminding we had a discussion some time ago. I come from engineering background. I do direct R&D groups of quite sophisticated technology. I work in the pressure sensor business, and we design sensing elements. I direct R&D groups of throughout U.S., Europe, and China. So this is a very high liability risk environments where you can imagine different agency and safety issues are impounding on the development of the sensors. Throughout my career, I had developed a leadership skills, very critical for improving efficiency and helping to set up a normative framework for executing a development and standards. Have a very good cross-cultural training background. As you can imagine, my employees are citizens of different worlds, different cultures and religions. Again, the commitment to initiative with Palo Alto, I just hopefully will be understood, having a full-time employment and not giving up, seeing this opportunity to have an interview. Additionally, I do chair currently a advisory commission at the Palo Alto School District. So just trying to reunite with community and seeing if my expertise and my skills could be found valuable asset for the board from different perspectives, perhaps.
Very good. Thank you. Council members, questions? Mark?
So as a Palo Alto Utilities customer, what have you seen, what's been your experience? Have you seen things that you thought, oh, they did that in a really clever, smart way? Or have there been times where, maybe you've been disappointed or thought that the city could have either provided its utilities or information in a better way?
Sure. I do not have much improvements per se comments, but in one of the example, seeing how this commission developed through years, as a being recipient of community, we are looking all for the preservation of our community, and Palo Alto is a pioneer on that. Having seen over the years that notification to customers was developed showing how well you are considering a conservation or really going overboard the consumption, the matrix of showing what you did last year versus this year. To the level, I am a numbers person, right, as you can imagine, but having this developed in a simple way, a representation saying this is how it was, this is where you are, and perhaps you can adjust something. It's a big deal in terms of really speaking the same language, because even though this is probably the most advanced community, but still bringing this, it's very, very critical. The actions, how we act right now as a community conservation due to the drought is also one of the impressive that we have publications and messages in various publications and the network. So that's another thing is important. I do see as a member of the community that citizens have a watch for each other, saying that conservation, specifically with the water, is critical, and helping each other. I myself go and pick up a recycled water for the plants, and I see my neighbors doing the same. So those are transparent and echoing with the citizens. I think these are good skills. Perhaps on some improvements, I would say networking right now is areas that many people have a network. We can enhance some tooling in terms of communication. That might be one of the aspects that I could think, but I do not know the scope of our ability of the council per se.
Thank you.
Very good. Other questions? Pat?
Have you had a chance to review some of the plan documents that drive the Utilities Department and that the Utilities Advisory Commission reviews and uses to judge actions?
To be frank, I haven't had a chance to review anything recent, but for I think last time we were here in April or May, I had looked at the report that was shared prior to that event in May. Very comprehensive, quite lengthy. I see that my judgment is that the multiple, I would assume commission works with the multiple sub-functions, some committees who are piling up the information. That's.
Are you familiar with our strategic plans for water and gas and electric?
Yes, as a recipient, as a citizen, but in terms of the numbers, probably not as much.
Very good. Other questions? Excuse the cough. So if you want to take a minute and do some wrap-up comments?
Sure. Again, I hope the Commission will find my expertise and my public commitment valuable for this Commission. It's really important for me to be part of it. As I say, I already work with Palo Alto School District and working diligently with one of the commissions that we work for this for our kids, who is our future. I do think because of my background, Commission can benefit from my expertise. Being also a representative of a diverse community might be another option. Maybe I can bring another perspective. And just seeing women leadership to bring and share this experience might be also one of the good opportunities for the Commission to consider. I might not know how the Commission operates. I have a pretty good understanding and pretty good vision, but I'm sure that I will be able to work together with similar citizens who are committing their time to that and still bring good results, hopefully.
Great. Thank you very much, and thank you for applying.
Good luck to you in doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
You too.
Amazes me how few of the applicants have looked at any of the key plan documents. It's a lot at once. Well, it doesn't mean you have to be expert on it, but
take a gander.
Look at one, open the cover.
So you can say you did.
Yeah.
Welcome, Mr. Lowenstein.
Good
Welcome.
evening.
All right.
So, as I think you know, we have 10 minutes, and you can make introductory comments and then leave time for council member questions.
Okay, well, I have here a crib sheet.
Okay.
In addition to the resume, there are a few other things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably one of the few members of the National Academy of Engineering that walks through these hallways. But I've had a lot of exposure to the electricity industry from day one. I was raised in Tacoma, Washington, and we had our local utility, Tacoma City Light, whom we very much respected. And I think they had a lot to do with my career following my growing up. I was also a union member for 3 unions. Tacoma was a union town. 3 unions before I was 20 years old for part-time jobs. So I saw that visually. I recognized climate change at a conference in Buenos Aires in 1990, before it was a mainstream problem. And we were very concerned about it. I did have a lot of international exposure, among which was 6 months in Dounreay, Scotland, which is about the northernmost place in Scotland, where the North Sea meets the Baltic. A lot of wind and a lot of rain, but it was a very interesting exposure to an operating culture for a new utility operation, because most of this plant was being built and most of the people had been farmers less than 6 months ago. So they had to develop a safety culture. And just as a simple example, one day I was sitting in my office, wanted to have a light bulb changed, so I called. 3 men showed up. 1 man was in charge, 1 carried the ladder, and 1 carried the light bulb, because they were all very poorly trained, and they figured the multitude would catch any mistake. And that's how safety culture was born throughout the world. The Germans had an interesting safety culture, and some of the international organizations in Vienna had documents on safety culture. And safety is very much an issue because of a number of incidents that have occurred. Like in Germany, one day, they had put a lot of effort into wind power in the Baltic. Well, one day the wind stopped blowing, and they had no backup. So they had a real problem. So that was a cultural problem too. I've been exposed to work in Japan, Korea, the United Kingdom, and South America, and I've been involved with international research projects. And so I guess those are sort of in addition to what you see on the resume, if you can read it. But I'm not sure I can add anything more.
Okay.
That's great, thank you.
Greg has a question for you.
Surely.
Safety culture. What future do you think nuclear power has as a clean energy?
Well, have you ever heard of Bill Gates?
Baseball player.
Different Gates.
Oh.
He's got a small group outside of Seattle developing what he calls a TerraPower reactor. And just during the last month or so, he spent some time in China because Chinese are interested in that particular type of reactor, basically a sodium-cooled reactor. And there have been sodium-cooled reactors throughout the world, but only one is currently running in Russia or Kazakhstan. The others have all been shut down, and largely because of funding. I think Bill Gates feels that the Chinese government is in a position to support this kind of funding when the Western world governments don't want to. So I personally feel that it's one of several answers to climate change. I think there's a big contribution from windmills, from solar power, and from nuclear, if you want to reduce the carbon production. And I don't know, I'm not sure about anaerobic digesters. On the one hand, my freshman chemistry said methane is pretty damn dangerous. On the other hand, presumably you can get rid of the methane, but you make CO2. So I don't know what you want to do. But to answer your question, I think nuclear power is an integral part of the future.
Great. Tom?
Briefly, could you just say what you did at Argonne National Labs and then the Electric Power Research Institute?
All right, at Argonne National Labs, I went there after I got my doctorate at Ohio State. I had spent 2 summers working at Los Alamos Laboratory as a graduate student, and they hired me at Argonne to get into reactor physics activities. And they sent me to the 1958 Geneva Conference, and I presented a paper with my co-author on how to do multi-group diffusion calculations in a practical way. After that, I spent a little time on a nuclear rocket, believe it or not, but that went down the tubes real fast. But then I spent my last couple of years at Argonne. I was director of the Applied Physics Division, which did a variety of things in the nuclear and the related type of activities, physics basically. And I was director of the project for the operation of the small breeder reactor for 2 years, which was a 20,000 kilowatt reactor, fast reactor that ran for 33 years without my help.
Very interesting.
Wow. Other council members?
Have you had a chance to review any of the key strategic documents for our utilities department?
I'm not sure I've seen the utilities department. I'm sort of aware of what's going on in Sacramento, because after I retired from EPRI, I became an independent consultant. And I wanted to be sure I knew what was going on here, because I was doing some consulting not only in this country, but also I did some for PG&E, in fact, also in Canada with Ontario Hydro, which is a pretty good-sized and very capable utilities. In fact, they taught me about safety culture. They were very good compared to many utility operations.
Great.
Okay, we have just 1 minute left if you care to make any closing comments.
Well, I have we've lived in Palo Alto for 40 years, and both while I was employed at EPRI and while I was an independent consultant. And we've had a very good understanding of how the utility interacts with the community. Sometimes it isn't perfect, but at least they're willing to respond. And in that sense, we've been very happy to live in Palo Alto, among other things, of course. I wish that, I don't know what the situation is about the anaerobic digester that was very prominent in your discussions. It was 2 years ago. I don't know where it stands now, but I'm very cautious about that, primarily because of the methane problem.
Yeah.
Remember, I used to play golf at the Mountain View Golf Course, and that was a hotbed of methane because it was basically on a garbage dump.
Okay.
I didn't run into that in Palo Alto.
Very good. Thank you so much, Mr. Lowenstein, for your application, for joining us this evening.
Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
He's not. He was term limited off.
Oh, he was doing
Yeah. Last year was his last year.
it. Okay.
It'll be nice to He'll be glad to hear he's remembered, though.
He didn't say positive or not.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
Welcome, Mr.
Thanks.
Valentine. So, 10 minutes we have for interviews, and if you care to make some opening comments, and then say plenty of time for councilmember questions.
Okay, will do. First of all, an introduction. My name's Arnie Ballantyne. I live over by the main library and art center. My wife and I have a fourth grader who goes to Duveneck. Never realized I'd probably spend the rest of my life in Palo Alto, but my sons informed us that that's the plan.
Smart sons.
Yeah. I grew up in Seattle. I'm still a recovering Seahawks victim. A little bit about myself. I grew up with 2 parents who were teachers and 4 grandparents who were teachers. So very quickly figured out that it's very important to be able to explain to people how things work. When I headed off to Harvey Mudd and got my degree in physics, often there were things I didn't understand. Learned the power of asking questions so that you could understand the basics of a technology, and then be able to relate those to other people. I graduated at a time when Hunt for Red October was a really exciting movie, and if that looked like Kool-Aid, I drank that. I'm at this point an ex-U.S. Navy submariner. I did one sea tour and was on a submarine that was stationed up in the state of Washington. Very exciting technology, but also at the same time teaches a lot of lessons about the ways you can have safety challenges. Came out of that understanding things about what can go wrong in reactor plants like the one at Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, of course, and more recently Fukushima. And that would be way more than a minute to talk about things like that. I went off and worked at IBM in microelectronics. There wasn't an engine room to spend a lot of time in, so instead I spent a lot of time in a semiconductor fab, also very fascinating technology. And I've now spent the last 15 years working on distributed generators, those being fuel cell generators, but of course when you're working on those you end up having to understand a lot of technologies that relate to how you're going to power things, inverter technologies, understanding other technologies involved. And so very humbly I'd like to offer my help however I can. I've had a lot of time understanding what things look like kind of from the load side of powering, whether it's residential loads or commercial loads, and seeing how distributed generators assist in that and help to balance things. And in particular, when I look at the challenges as Palo Alto works on electrifying more and more with electric vehicles popping up in house after house after house, and trying to find the balance between meeting commercial needs and residential needs in a system that is stable is a very big challenge.
Very good. Colleagues, questions? Pat?
Just following up on your last comments about technology directions, have you been paying attention, it sounded like, to the discussions we're having on electrification and whether we have greater electrification or not, a greater both local and system-wide reliance on renewables. So what are your thoughts about the directions, where we're likely to be in 10 or 20 years in the ability to have a clean, balanced electricity system, and the roles of both distributed clean generation like fuel cells and storage?
Sure. I think there are at least a few challenges. And what's interesting is that they're not necessarily right on top of each other. On the one hand, when you look at things from a very macroscopic perspective, more and more electric vehicles, when you look at the reports that you yourselves get to see, those don't necessarily put a dent in the 2016 energy problem. But they do on my block, where the distribution delivering power to the street that has the library and the art center on it, if you say instead of the 20 or so houses on a given block, and the residential load, now we're also going to be recharging 20 electric vehicles. That infrastructure now has twice the load. And I think one of the major challenges that's going to come from that is that you have the effect where you double the current, you get 4 times the heat, and now electrical components that were pretty happy in 2015 or maybe 2010 start to see a lot more strain. Duveneck had a power outage last year. That seemed odd, and I think the probability of things like that increasing without some very residential infrastructure work or significant study, significant. So then on the other hand, you have the need for commercial generation, which is really often at a different scale. I can easily power a house with solar panels on the roof, and I can do things like add batteries, and I can make it a self-sustaining entity electrically. But you can't do that with a building that has significant compute resources inside. There isn't enough roof space, and you can go and study ideal theoretical limits for multi-level solar, and it's never going to work. So somehow you've got to bring that solar power from elsewhere. And I do think that the ideas of having large solar in significant places where you can get a lot of sunlight and move that into where those buildings are makes a lot of sense. The problem is that the natural gas grid is very much like a mesh. So if I have a problem in one place on that mesh, I can reroute the natural gas around. The steam moving around the engine room on our submarine was the same way. If I have a problem with the valve over on the port side of the ship, we can move steam around on the starboard side. You need that. The electrical grid is much more of a daisy chain. And I think that the challenge, when you say where are we going to be in 10 years, is getting to the point where if you do rely on external generation sources, how do you build in linkages so that you don't have single points of failure in that daisy chain? You mentioned batteries, and I think that battery technology certainly could help with that, because if you had local storage in Palo Alto and the big solar farm somewhere where there's lots of low-cost real estate, and move it in, you could store hours and hours of energy. The problem is that, again, putting on my submariner hat, you start getting to the point where the energy densities of batteries are approaching what you have in gasoline tanks. So, again, you have to think about the safety of having that much energy stored in that location. You have to make sure that that's carefully thought out and designed. Same thing on a residential scale. I'm certain that someone can figure out a way to put stored energy in the middle of a house, but I would not carry my gas can and put it in the middle of my house for good reasons. And so that, again, is going to take a lot of careful thought.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Corey?
So obviously you talked a lot about electricity. You allude to water in your concern about updating some of our documents. Kind of open-ended prompt. Tell us your thoughts about water.
Well, I think that actually I just flew back from Japan, and I saw the neatest toilet I've ever seen. Where when you flush, never, and we could get into the electrical load of all of the complicated Japanese toilets. This toilet, when you flushed it, had a sink built into the lid, and as the toilet was refilling the reservoir, you could wash your hands, and that water went into the reservoir and then ended up going into the bowl when you flushed the next time.
Instant gray water.
Yes. So I think the gray water use has got to be a focus at a residential level. At our house, we put a dent in the problem by turning our sprinklers off a few years ago, and so if you want to see what brown dirt looks like, you can you're welcome to visit. That only goes so far. Then what do you do to figure out how to have more effective use? And I think strategies like that will help. I realize that in Palo Alto there are already incentives to encourage people to come up with gray water solutions that are appropriate, because at the same time you don't want to create a public health problem by having rampant use of gray water in crazy ways. The other one that strikes me as an opportunity is, as you get towards the areas of Palo Alto which are at lower altitude and people are digging basements, especially by the library. Inevitably, they're pumping gallons and gallons of water on a continuous basis in order to keep that area clean during construction. Again, I think there are a lot of interesting sources of gray water that can be tapped into, such as the toilet.
Okay, very good. I think,
20 seconds.
yep, what can you say in 20 seconds?
I guess I've learned the long and hard way in the Navy how to become a very quick learner about technologies, how to then explain those to people, so that then groups can make decisions that make sense for the cases at hand, and humbly offer my services if I can be of help, recognizing that there are a lot of great candidates that you've heard from tonight.
Just real quick, thanks for applying. We do have 12 candidates for one position, so.
Only 11.
Please apply again if it doesn't happen this time.
Will do.
The UAC is the commission especially where we get always a plethora of like really qualified, excellent candidates. So I certainly support Tom's comment, no matter what happens.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Either that or we have to expand the commission by 12.
Yeah, right.
You know?
No, it's always fantastic.
So, that concludes our interviews this evening and meeting adjourned.
All right.